Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I'm going to make a mini artwork using my DIY texture paste, and I will also share some tips on how to avoid cracking when working with plaster mixtures. I like experimenting with texture paste in different consistencies. I recently shared a video about the DIY texture mix I use for the paintings I gifted to my friend. This time, I'm going for a smooth consistency. Let's see if it turns out well or if it ends up cracking. I'm using 4 ingredients here: plaster of Paris, acrylic paint, white glue, and water. My ratio for this mix is 1 part plaster, 1 part acrylic paint, but this is just for experimenting, plus a little glue and water. As you can see, the paste looks like cream. It is so smooth that I'm worried it might crack in the end. But since I added glue and acrylic paint, I'm hoping it will hold together. Notice how the waves look soft. When I make my ocean wave art, I love seeing texture that mimics the splash of water. Like I said, I enjoy experimenting. So I want to see what happens if I add too much water, too much acrylic paint, or even more plaster. When I first started making my own texture paste, my biggest mistake was adding too much water whenever the paste felt like it was hardening. That made the water to plaster ratio way too high. I used to rush to apply the paste on my canvas, then panic when it dried too fast. I'd add more water thinking it would fix the problem, but actually, that was the problem. Remember, water doesn't add flexibility. If you're creating ocean waves, adding too much water won't give you enough time to shape them. Now, whenever I make texture paste, I always start by mixing in acrylic paint. Unlike water, acrylic paint improves strength and works like a binder. In earlier blogs, I tried using gesso with a lot of water, but I noticed the same thing. Whenever I add too much water to plaster, it gets rigid and stiff, and the paste becomes really hard to mix. You can use water, but only in the right amount. And you have to work fast and apply the paste directly onto the canvas before it hardens. Gesso or acrylic paint, on the other hand, are slower drying mediums, so they give you more time to apply your paste without worrying that it will dry too quickly. If you ever notice your paste drying too fast while you're working, just add a little more gesso or acrylic paint. Avoid adding more water. So here are two important points. First, if you mix plaster with gesso or acrylic, it slows down the drying process. Second, if you mix it with just water, it dries quickly and is more likely to crack. My tip: use glue or acrylic paint instead if you want a smooth consistency. Yes, adding too much water to plaster will almost always cause cracks and make it weaker. After shaping the waves, I moved on to the shore. I added a little paste and tried mixing in some sand I bought from a local store. But honestly, I didn't like the outcome. So I scraped it off. Such a waste of materials, right? Anyway, I'll find another way to use that sand later. For now, I will leave the paste to dry for a day. The next day, I painted a simple sunset glow over the texture. I didn't go for a detailed painting since my main focus was creating texture. Actually, there's no single right ratio for making texture paste. It depends on the look and thickness you want. Personally, if I want a thicker texture, I add more plaster. If I want it smoother, I add more acrylic paint or gesso. But remember, cracking also depends on application. If the layer is too thick, the surface will set first and pull against the softer underlayer. That's when cracks appear. So the question is, even if I use more acrylic paint than water, will it still crack? Let's find out. And here's the result. As you can see, there are cracks. Even though I had more flexibility by mixing equal parts plaster and acrylic paint, I still couldn't avoid the cracks. The lesson here is, if there's too much acrylic, the plaster doesn't set properly, and as water evaporates, shrinkage causes cracks. So always remember, keep your plaster to binder ratio around maybe 2 parts plaster to 1 part acrylic, or if you have gesso, you can also use that. And don't be afraid to experiment. The best way to learn is by doing. I hope you enjoyed this little experiment. If you have suggestions for me, drop them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.